Let's now move on to one more headline as we finish, and this has been the biggest discussion across all networks for the past 1 week, and that has to do with the ongoing investigation into the death of Sharon, that university student whose body was discovered in a forest in Homa Bay. Now, a lot has been said. The matter is before court. Yesterday, 2 people were arraigned. One of them will be back in court today, possibly to take plea and possibly to be released on bail. My question is, and I've asked this question to every other panel I've hosted here since this matter appeared. Are you optimistic this time around that we will get a conviction? This is one of those high-profile murders that we witnessed. We have this history of having high-profile murders that end up in the air and nothing at the end of it. Former Kang'ata MP Mushai was killed inside the city center with the CCTV cameras just a few meters away. Up till today, no conviction, and that was it. Jacob Juma was killed, and CCTV cameras followed him throughout town. Nothing happened. Chris Musando was killed. Nothing happened. We were talking about that young girl who died on Wayaki Way and was run over by a number of vehicles. Oscar Ulu, Kang'ata, all those people were killed, and nothing happened years later. And it has become a trend. This time around, are you at all optimistic that this time we might actually get a conviction beyond the big headlines, beyond the kind of emotion and frustration we are seeing as exhibited by the dailies?
Yes, for 2 reasons. Number one, we have 2 new holders of major public offices which are directly related to investigations of criminal cases. We have a new DPP, we have a new DCI. And so far, they appear to be doing their work with a lot of gusto. So to that extent, I foresee a positive outcome. Number 2, there is a lot of public limelight which have been pointed on this case. So unless you people of the media, you backtrack and then the matter goes below your rankings, if at all you are to maintain that same tempo, I foresee a prosecution.
But even the previous cases have received similar coverage by media.
Some of the cases that you have pointed, they were quite problematic in terms of even public opinion. I say that, for instance, you recall that example you have given of a person called Gishuki, isn't it? He was called Gishuki, right? Oulu or whatever.
Yes.
Together, he was Oscar together with another guy, right? There were people who were fighting for the rights of the Mungiki suspects, right? But remember, there was also a section of the public which held the view that the government needed to be strong when it comes to criminal gangs, right? So, in a sense, it was a divided public.
Former Kang'ata MP.
For former Kang'ata MP, the last time I checked, there are people who are currently facing prosecution in court. So I think the police there, they have done their work. Yes,
Chris Musando?
Musando, again, to me, the evidence was also not very clear. It was not quite clear. But so far for this one, when you compare that case and this one, the evidence appears to be quite clear. So far, because surely here you are talking of a person who was certain person to enter to certain vehicles, and then those people ultimately they are killed. There's a witness who has been
this time around, you're more confident you're seeing we might get a conviction.
Well, I will not say 100%. You never know, right? You never know. In criminal matters or even in court cases, the way you see things outside. When you go to a court of law and there is a lot of cross-examination, you have to follow what is called the Evidence Act, which calls for so many things. We might find that case taking another angle. But all factors being constant, what we say ceteris paribus, I foresee a conviction. The only thing I would urge the DPP and also the DCA to do, I've seen a case mentioning there is a story that I've seen in the newspaper mentioning a godfather. I think they need to arrest that godfather. If they don't arrest that godfather, everyone is going to say those investigations were compromised.
Well, but we have a very bad history when it comes to such high-profile cases.
Well,
do you think anything has changed this time around?
Let me tell you. Kenya has very good investigative and prosecutorial authorities. What has always been lacking is the political goodwill. Because you may retreat to go do your work. But then a phone call comes from the highest of officers, asking you to go slow on a matter. Let me tell you, the former DPP, Keriako Tobiko, is a very competent guy. Only that he was working under a very difficult environment. No one gave him the machines and the powers and the goodwill to prosecute his matters. That is why in the public eye he's a failure. Then comes Nordin Haji, who has entered into office at a time when the government is fully out to fight corruption, giving him all the necessary tools to fight this war to the very bitter end. So people look at him and say, then he's much better than the other guy. No, it is only that circumstances have changed. In homicide investigations, the first person to be arrested are the beneficiaries of that crime. That is how investigations are carried out. Who was likely to benefit had Sharon died? These are the people you go to, not passing the buck. And let me give it to the media. The media has done a splendid job this time round, and I don't know whether that has been necessitated by the presence of a journalist who missed death by a whisker. So perhaps the media is telling us that, you touch one of our own, we will send you to the graves. But I wish that even cases that do not touch any member of the Fourth Estate, they would pursue it with the same vigor to the very bitter end. But, it's quite interesting about what is happening in Homa Bay and this case and what people are pronouncing out there. A public court has already given a verdict, even before the investigative authorities are through with their duties. How I wish that even as media sheds more light in the dark corners of this matter, that the public would be a little patient, because again, pronouncements have the capacity to interfere with evidence, have the capacity to interfere with investigations. Because, the public has directed its attention towards a particular individual. And they are asking, why is this individual not behind bars when everybody else is? And you never know, people who perhaps are also pushing that direction know something that perhaps would want to dissuade the thinking of the Kenyan people a different direction. So I know our investigative authorities have what it takes to unearth this misery. So we need to give them time and give us what is beneath.
Do you think this time round they will give us a conviction? They will actually get to the bottom of it?
Well, Kenyans are quite forgetful.
Because as a nation we become very skeptical when
because of the past.
Yeah, because of the past.
Yeah.
Beyond the headlines, we just know nothing will happen. After this, after the dailies stop writing about it and probably relegate it to page 3 or 4.
Yeah, then it will be gone, yeah. So I wish the public pressure and what the media has done would continue. So that at least for once, and this is a very innocent student, a very young person, so we need to put a stop and make crime the most expensive thing in this country. Why people have escaped the dragnet is because people have cheapened the process of prosecution. You get into a court of law, for instance, and you ask yourself, do I pay the judge or do I hire a lawyer? And if both would see your freedom, then you choose one and you go with it. But once we decide to make crime very painful, very expensive and inescapable, then this country will have a different paradigm shift.
As you make your final comments, there are those who say that probably killing a person in Kenya is no longer tracks the kind of penalty that it should. That probably that has contributed to the fact that people are finding it much easier to kill. That, like today, for example, whether or not any of these suspects is charged with murder, they will be released on bail.
Yeah.
The fact that even if you're convicted of murder and sentenced to death, that will be commuted to life in prison. No one hangs anymore. That as a result, we found it easier to take human life as a society. As you make your final comments.
Yes and no. To me, that's quite a complicated question. I think yes and no. Let me start with the no part. No, because we have seen societies which have less crime societies like, let's say, Sweden, Norway, such Nordic countries, they don't have such punitive measures when it comes to crime. Even if you murder a person in Norway, you're not going to face death penalty. So it appears there's no correlation between the penalties and crime. It appears crime so far, as per the studies which have been done, is more of an equality issue. For instance, you can see it appears that Godfather gives some poor people money to go kill another poor person. So meaning, assuming that lady was empowered financially, there's every likelihood she would not have gone to have a relationship with such a big person. So meaning that the best case scenario is to empower her. The same appears even to those poor people who had that impunity to go and kill that lady. If they were living a good life, most likely they will not agree to that. So meaning, for us to go forward, for us to achieve the so-called crimeless society, a society with no crimes, we need to endeavor towards fighting inequality, to ensure people are living in dignity. Most likely they are not going to be to go into crime. But on the other hand, there is some impunity that I see with some of our criminals, some impunity, which at times I think can only be addressed by very punitive, retributive penalties. So in a sense, I tend at times to support the penalty, because surely if you start slaughtering a person like a chicken, and then we give you bail, then when we go to jail, you use taxpayers' money to stay in comfort for more than 40 years, which taxpayers' money probably would have been used to go and educate poor people. So in a sense, at times I get convinced death penalty should be introduced, but only in the rarest cases, like in the instance case when you kill a defenseless, poor, young university student who has even children who no longer will have a mother or even a father. Okay. So to that extent, if I were to be asked, the person who did this act, they deserve death penalty because of the unique nature, but not in all instances. Not in all instances. But we must also fight for a more equal society.
Yeah. Well, we embraced a new constitution because of our past. We had successive regimes that paid little regard to human rights. You know, you could be arrested without cause, held in communicado detention for long, tortured, maimed, and even killed. So that is why we paid a lot of attention to human rights and Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of our Constitution. And you look at all the chapters of our Constitution, they have footprints of Bill of Rights, because we were coming from a very, very difficult situation. And out of the same Bill of Rights, embraced the bail, application for bail in Article 49 of the Constitution. And you know, this bail is guaranteed to everybody. Even somebody who has been seen killing still has, you know, out of, you know, respect to human rights, get a bail and is let scot-free for a long period of time as the judicial process takes shape. And you know, the backlog in the judiciary also would make cases stay there forever. So at the same time, this person who was killed gets back to be integrated within society and still again perpetuate the same evil. We have had criminals who are arrested consecutively. They have a case pending in court, he commits another crime, taken back, gets out on bail, go back, commit, and then it becomes repetitive. At the end of the day, then you don't have a society. So I think maybe we also need to look at our you know, criminal justice system and say there are certain cases that do not allow for a bail to be granted. I know right now they're looking at maybe you're a flight risk or the public may lynch you when they set you free, and this is likely going to happen with this guy. I saw people literally baying for the blood of this guy in Homa Bay yesterday. So perhaps those could also be additional to what is being considered currently. Also look at the degree and the nature of crimes that are committed so that we don't have murderers coming back to live with us in societies. Okay. To act as an example also.
Yes. Of course, the number of murders that we read even at the domestic level. The kind of headlines we see is that people have found it much easier to kill. Even in a relationship that's not working, it's actually easier to kill the spouse instead of walking away. And that's an unfortunate incident. And where are we heading as a society? Well, those are just some of the issues behind the headlines this morning. Of course, the fuel crisis, the ongoing investigations into the death of Sharon, and of course, what was happening at the City County Assembly yesterday with that impeachment of Speaker Beatrice Elachi. One more headline, scandal of a fight for e-citizen cash cow, that you can read on the Daily Nation this morning. This is where we wrap up our news review this morning. Thank you so much, Jared Okello, MP Nyando, and Irungu Kang'ata, Senator Muranga, also the Deputy Majority Whip in the Senate, helping us look at the issues behind the headlines.